Today we have a bit of a mixed bag of SMITE updates and news. The first one, the most important one that we're going to start with here, is PTS changes to Cthulhu. So Cthulhu was very strong on PTS, I already talked about this at length now, and he is actually receiving multiple balance changes. I sent Clumsy my feedback for Cthulhu a while ago, after which he told me which things they were looking to change. And those seem to be the ones that they have gone with now as well. And I have to say I'm relatively happy with most of these, if not all of these. There's none of them that I would be unhappy with at least. I was a little bit surprised about one of the changes, but overall I think they did a relatively good selection. Though I will say that there's an ability that I think will see some nerfs down the road, which is not targeted here yet. What Clumsy told me in the context of this, and that's why I'm bringing this up, is that they are planning to release Cthulhu in a relatively strong state. I think that is absolutely understandable, and I think most people would agree with this, because Cthulhu is super hyped up at the moment, and if he was released underpowered, I think a lot of people would be disappointed, especially a lot of new players that are coming into the game for Cthulhu or that are returning to the game after a long time for Cthulhu. So I think having him a bit on the stronger side is very good, also from the perspective of him not being the easiest card to learn. He actually has a fair bit of a learning curve until you really get his whole kit down, so most people I think will not necessarily do well in their first game. And as such, making him a little bit stronger after you've learned him, I think is something that feels rewarding and will ensure that people take the time to even learn him and not drop him after one game. So the first change that was made was a nerf to Rushing Terror. Here, the magical power scaling is decreased from 40 to 30%. That is the initial part of the ability when you dash directly at an enemy. The part that follows afterwards still has the same scaling. So previously it was 40% scaling plus 20% scaling, now it is 30 plus 20% scaling, so a total of 50% scaling. The ability still has a very high base damage though. It's still 240 plus 170 or 410 in total if you can confirm both parts. As I've talked about in my mechanics video, that is not always the case if the target is moving. If you hit them with a middle dash, you will sometimes not confirm the second part of the damage because the projectile is a little bit slower, but overall it will still be a relatively high damage output in most situations at least. I could definitely see this ability see some further nerfs down the road. I am a little bit surprised that they only went down by 10% here, especially to the base damage values of the ability as well, to make it a little less rewarding to level this ability early, because at the moment there is sufficient reason to max this first, especially in solo in my opinion. The second nerf is also a very important one, and that is a nerf to Descend into Madness, which is his ultimate, or rather the part of his ultimate where he turns into his ultimate form. This comes with a hefty amount of AoE damage as well, and this damage is being targeted and being nerfed. Here the initial hit damage is reduced from 160 to 340 down to 150 to 330, and the scaling is also reduced from 50% to 40%. So we're losing 10 base damage on every rank, and we're also losing 10% scaling here. I gotta be honest, I think this nerf is also very careful. I think that his ultimate is extremely strong and it's very quick damage. The delay here could be increased, and for all I care, this part of his kit doesn't even need damage in my opinion, because he has damage in every other ability and in his ult abilities. So I think this is a very conservative change here, but we'll see where that goes in the future. It's at least showing us that they're targeting the right points of him. They're targeting these very strong points, and then they can fine-tune them further later down the road. The last nerf is one that surprised me, and that is a nerf to Sever. Sever is the basic attack replacement in his ultimate, this area attack that he can use that doesn't cost any mana. Here the damage is reduced from 130 to 350 to 120 to 340. So again, 10 off every rank. I did not particularly see Sever as his main issue during his ultimate. Maybe this is because I didn't really have the chance to play him on good ping. Maybe it's much more reliable to hit this on good ping. But overall I felt like it's relatively hard to aim this, not because it's small or slow or anything, but rather because it's so hard to see where you're aiming because of your massive model. And due to the delay, I also feel like the range feels much shorter than the range of year 2 of Devastate, which I think is the scarier ability of the two. But at the same time, I don't think that it's an issue to nerf this either. I think taking away some damage from him in general is a good idea, and this ability is relatively spammable, so I'm completely fine with this nerf as well. The ability that I think will see nerfs in the future is probably Transfuse, the 3 in his ultimate. And that's because while this doesn't have that much application on a casual level, where you only really benefit from the damage and sometimes the healing, on higher levels of play, especially in competitive, this will be massive between the movement speed increase and the power increase. The good thing is that because these effects are somewhat disconnected between levels of play, you can target specific levels of play very easily here. So if you want to nerf the potential of this ability on the casual level, which is probably going to be less necessary, then you can just nerf the damage and maybe the healing. But on higher levels of play, where enemies will also consistently run anti-heal, you can then look to specifically target the movement speed or power increase, so that you end up with a change that will hardly be noticed on lower levels anyways. I do still think that Cthulhu will see further nerfs down the road, potentially before he even hits ranked, so I think this is just a start to get a feel for where he stands and then balance him easier that way, but I'm happy with the direction they're going in. In addition to that, we also have some new data mined skins. These were found by Daredust once again, and he also rendered all of them. So the links for them will be down below if you want to check them out yourself. The first one is Galaxy Forger Vulcan. You can see his card out here, really just an extension of the Galaxy themed skins that we already have. What's interesting is this black hole as an eye. Apparently his abilities will also be using black hole effects, and even in his ultimate you'll have some meteors and stuff. Here we have his actual front view, so we can also see that there's this effect going through his entire body, as well as it seems even on his hammer, at least some sort of lightning effect, maybe even the full star void effect and everything. And here's his back view as well. I'm not quite sure what this back part is, where normally the cannons would be, if that's where like the projectile for the ult will come out instead. What I think is really interesting about this skin is the turret, which will look like this. Very unusual look, and I am very interested in seeing how the projectiles will look as well. With these skins, always keep in mind that this is not exactly the final lighting and everything on them, so they can look slightly different in game. We also have a sneak peek of his voice pack.
I have seen the beginning, and will be there at the end. Time to show these children who they are dealing with.
What's very interesting to me is how heavy they went on the echo effect here. I'm not sure if this is final, but it seems a little bit over the top in my opinion. The next skin is Mystical Manipulator Nox. Somebody in the replies, Mr. Pokepants, to the Reddit post pointed out that this skin kind of fits in with the, I want to call it Sailor Moon or Mystical Guardian, whatever series that we have in the SMITE with some skins already, as a villain. And I think that is the goal that they have here, looking at certain parts of her dress with these stars on it and everything. Also very interesting version of the hair in this case. I gotta say that looking at the front view, it doesn't that much set itself apart from default Nox in my opinion. The most obvious difference here being the head parts with the helmet and the hair, but other than that it's just a pink dress with some spikes and stars on it. In the back view we can see the hair a little bit better, so I think it actually does justice to the card art. I hope that they have enough animation room for the hair though, for it not to look completely weird. Again, we have a little bit of a teaser of her voice pick here as well.
My will controls all. Dreams, conflicts, moments. They all serve my whims.
I've saved the best for last year, because this one is Living Weapon Tour, and this skin, in my opinion, is absolutely amazing. You can see the card art here. It honestly looks a little bit like Bakasura almost in the card art, but I think seeing this one, or seeing the in-game model of this one, actually makes it look a lot more impressive than the card art alone. Because this is what it looks like in-game. And I'm starting with a back view for a reason here, because I wanted to show you this weapon, because I think the weapon is really the most important part of this look. And it gives me very, very strong Soul Calibur vibes. There was a character in Soul Calibur that had his sword kind of with this eye on it. And I actually had to look him up. The name is Nightmare, which I know used to be really frustrating to play against if you didn't really know the game very well, because he had this ridiculous range on his abilities back then. And here we have the front view as well. So this, I think, is a really cool design overall. Would be even more of a nightmare if the skin didn't come out after all the movement speed item nerfs, but hey, we'll take what we can get. Either way, this is definitely my favorite one of the bunch, and I kind of hope that they do more skins like that. I mean, it would be a bit redundant on Bakasur, but I guess there could be other gods that could make pretty good fits for a theme like this as well. Let's play a snippet of his voice pack as well.
The blade you see is not the weapon. I am the weapon.
And last but not least, we have a little bit of a quick update from HiRez about this week's schedule. Normally this week they would have their art show and everything, and used to have the dev inside, which apparently they're not doing anymore. But what they are doing this week is they're doing a charity stream. They're raising money for Color of Change, and I'm guessing if it's like HiRez other charity streams, that might be very worth watching. So that's happening at the times on Wednesday, when you would normally see all those other shows. And that's it for today. If everything goes as planned, the next video will be what we can learn from the pros part 2. So if you want to see that and you're not subscribed yet, feel free to sub button and maybe the bell so you get notified of that. Other than that, see you for the next one soon. DXLOTH out.